So I've re-recorded the Mozart Munich Sonata number 5 without even knowing that it was already on my channel. And not only that, it was uploaded exactly 1 year ago. But since we now have 2 recordings, I thought what a good idea maybe to compare the 2 versions and see what the differences are. Maybe we can learn something about that. So without further ado, I invite you on my computer to talk about the twin recordings of the Mozart G major sonata. So let's dive in directly to the comparison of the twin recordings at my computer, and we are here in Sony Vegas Pro, which is this software program, the editing program I use to edit the videos with, and I've copied both of the recordings into this program. So you see here number 1, the recording of last week, part 1, part 2, part 3, and the same for the recording of last year. And here in the screen, which is not the best quality because you have a preview here, but anyway, you see here recording of last week, recording of last year. So something that we can tell, I've adjusted the beginning, aligned the beginning of each part, is that the video of the recording of last year was a little bit faster. So for the first movement, that's not too much if we compare the endings, but for the second part, that's considerably. And with the third part, a little bit the same. We're ending sooner in last year's recording. Let's listen to the recording of last week. So in the practicing hours of last Sunday, and that's a video that you can find on the channel, I've released that live stream, I'm talking about this specific part, which is very difficult to hit the tempo because you have so many counter accents, and I remember having struggled with this piece a lot because find a framework, find a movement in which everything fits and gives the listener time enough to adjust with every accent. That's basically what Mozart is doing, is changing from 3/4 to 2/4 quite regularly, and those accents gives a kind of weird feeling because the melody is gluing that all together in a beautiful way. So that's the reason why I came up with this tempo, which is a little bit slower than last year's video. Check that. Not too much. One of the biggest difference, that's very interesting in fact, since both recordings are a little bit in the same range. I've measured the timings, and it's about, in the last week's recording I'm playing at 86 for the quarter note, and in last year's recording I'm playing over 90, 92, 94, 96. It fluctuates a little bit for the quarter note. So there is an increase or a decrease in tempo if you would like to have the last recording as a benchmark. But the interesting thing is, if you listen to both recordings, then, and I'm pleased with that in my last week's video you have more this metrical feel, and I'm not talking about metronome numbers now, the metrical feel. I mean with that, in fact, the feeling and the tension within the feeling of the beat structure and the bar structure, which means you have a heavy beat, you have a light beat, you have a heavy beat, I have a light beat. And so I believe this is very essential in all 18th century music. It changes when the tempo rubato becomes, that's what I believe, becomes what we understand with rubato today, a fluctuation of tempo. Tempo rubato in the 18th century meant something else than that. But steadiness of tempo, of movement, was very important. And of course, we are all humans, so there is a fluctuation in tempo. But normally, I think overall, this 1, Shum. So, and all the energy comes from the heavy beat and goes to the light beat. I often compare it to a football. If when you throw it in the air, it goes up, have energy, and it stops, and there is a point where it returns. So I feel that very much in the last year's recording. You still feel a kind of need, a kind of pushiness from one heavy beat actually to the other one, and it's not big of a difference, but listen, we start with the last year's recording and listen to that difference. Sorry, I want to so I'm throwing the ball every time with a little bit, maybe a little bit more energy than is necessary. It's an option though. If you go to last week's recording, you will find more a peaceful movement. I like this. You hear? Dum da dee dum dum. If you would compare it to a singer, which we did in the practicing hours, so the Italian cantabile style, it was very strong in the days. You dum da dee dum da dee dum da dum, and then you see this movement goes up, dee da dum da dee da dum. Gets energy. So overall, I prefer the last week's version, but it's a small difference. But the consequences are within the margin of small tempo differences are actually big. It's a different recording. So both are possible, of course. It's a decision. Okay, then we go to the andante, and there we have bigger differences. Last week's recording went like this. And last year's recording went like this. So you can also check it out. Both recordings are online. So this is not a small difference. This is in fact a huge difference. The character of the piece changes completely. And listen, what happens now, and it's interesting to take this with you in all the metronome discussion. Going slower is difficult to adjust. So we start with the fastest recording of last year. With this one now. And then we go to the and that's typically what happens when you go from a faster experience, or you're used to a faster movement. That's always the case also for me, going slower. As a listener, as a player, it doesn't play that much, but as a listener, you need to adjust, and you need to adjust a few times. So the difference here in this recording is that I played in the second one, the last year's one, according to the quarter note, and here in the last week's recording I've decided to go with the 8th note. So the differences are quite big. I play around 84, 88 for the 8th note last week. Last year I was at 110 for the 8th note. So then we have the presto. There are differences, but not too much, I think. Last week. Then we add last year's. would say that both recordings are within the same margins, but there is a clear difference, and that shows also the importance of the tempo and the movement. We've talked about that. Movement is much more important, but the tempo is the thing we can measure. This is, if I talk about tempo, I mean the movement. The movement is what indicates, what defines the character of the piece. And you see here the differences are in tempo. I've played last week dotted quarter note 66, so for the whole bar 66, and I played last year 74. So differences are considerable because we play in 8 notes, so it adds if you multiply by 3, but the character is much different. In the last week's recording, it's much, again, more within the field of heavy beat, light beat. I really think that's something we should strive for in the 18th century. Last year's recording was a little bit hard. Then that's the opposite. You go from this recording, think it's nice, it's fine. You go to the little bit faster and you say, there's something wrong with it. Because you don't feel this. But again, you can adjust to that and it's all fine. I mean, of course, I'm more mentally now with the last week recording because I've give this a few hours of my time to think this over, and that's more the character of the piece. It's light, it's very joyful, it's presto of course, so we can go into notation, but that's not for this video. But the last year's recording is a little bit more hurried than the one I made last week, and I don't like hurrying in music, harmonically speaking. You can play fast notes, but overall the feel should be something always very relaxed. That's at least as I think as a listener. Okay, I think that was interesting. Both recordings again are on YouTube. You can check them out if you want. It's easy to find. Go to my channel and type in, there's a little there's a magnifying glass, and you can type in Kachelverzeichnis KV283 and you will find both recordings. So I hope you like this comparison between those two recordings. They've been produced completely separated from each other. I seldomly listen to earlier recordings before making a new one, if I know that there is a recording, at least. But afterwards, comparing them is always something you can learn from. It shows your evolution. Sometimes you did something before that you liked more than afterwards. It's a game that goes up and goes down. Anyway, that was it for today's video. We are having on Thursday a video on a very interesting topic, the long or short appoggiatura or grace note in Mozart music, heavily debated subject, and I will present also my summary, which I will actually be selling as a PDF, as an ebook, of a summary of Leopold Mozart's ornamentation system. If this is your first time here on the channel, I'd love to have you subscribed. I'm covering here music, mainly keyboard music from Bach to Beethoven. We're trying to reconnect the tradition from Bach to Beethoven, as there was a strong tradition that we might have lost today, the oversight of that complete period, and it gives us new insight, new input for the music that we know so well, and that's a very exciting journey, at least I think. If you want to stay tuned of that, please subscribe to the channel. There's also a bell notification. If you hit that, you can set your notification system by mail or by push notification on your mobile. Might be handy for the live streams we're doing with a lot of interaction. Hope to see you then, and then we talk further. Bye!